Welcome to the Smart Dating Academy podcast. I'm Bela Gandhi, the founder of Smart Dating Academy and your host. I started Smart Dating Academy in 2009 because I had this crazy knack of giving people dating advice that actually worked, that I took. I've been married for almost 25 years, and now my company helps people to date smarter and to find love. This podcast is meant to bring more love into your life, no matter where you are and what you do. And we're here to bring more life into your love. Smart daters, welcome back. This is your favorite episodes or your favorite set of episodes and mine. And we're going to talk today about a real life person who is beautiful and amazing and found love after dark tragedy. And she's going to tell you her story and what she did to find the next lid to her pot. And without further ado, I welcome my former client, current dear friend, and new book author, Dawn Anderson. Hi, Dawn. I'm so happy to have you here.
I am so excited to be here. Thank you for asking me today, Bella.
Oh my gosh, you are adorable and inspirational. And you guys, for anybody, and you'll see this when you listen to Dawn, to talk to Dawn, Dawn has a certain je ne sais quoi. The first time I talked to Dawn, I was like, I want to know this woman. I want to help this woman. The beauty that's on the outside is only pales to the beauty that's on the inside of Dawn. So
goodness, you are so sweet, Bella. Thank you.
It's all real. And you know, I feel this way about you from my heart. So
the feeling is mutual for sure.
So we were just talking about screwball and peanut butter whiskey, but I promise I will not be my dating squirrel ADHD self today that much. Dawn, tell us, tell us about you, and how you met the love of your life, Mike. Just give us a little bit of backstory.
Oh my goodness. So just to give it some context, Mike is my late husband who I lost in a tragic accident a few years ago. But yeah, there was so much to the story before that happened.
Tell us everything. We're all ears.
Well, Mike was amazing. So I met him really young. Like I was only 17 years old, but he was just a couple years older than me. But I mean, I don't know. They say that sometimes you just know when you meet the right person. Well, I was young and I knew that, but I still I knew that this was the man I was going to end up with. Like, I don't know how you know that, but I just did. And so Mike was we met in karate class. Isn't that funny? So
I love that 17-year-old Dawn
was just getting ready to go to college. So I was just graduating from high school, getting ready to go to college. And I was in this karate class, which was super fun. I loved it. And Mike had joined, and I was actually dating the instructor at the time, but we were on our way kind of out. I was moving away. It wasn't going to work. It wasn't going to be long-term. So, so I met Mike, and gosh, number one, he was so handsome and but had this real quiet energy, and was so kind and sweet. And so I met him in the karate class, and then I ran into him at a party, and I remember our eyes kind of locked across the room, and something clicked, and it was magical. And we talked, and then later on we got together and started dating. And I went away to college, but we still kept dating. And I had so many people tell me advice, like, just, keep your options open. You're young, you're in college, you can't settle on someone right this minute. But I never doubted the fairy tale for a minute. Like, this was my fairy tale, and I was going to be with this person. And so neither one of us are perfect, right? Because nobody's perfect, but we were perfect for each other. So like our strengths and weaknesses just complemented one another. And we had all these big dreams, and he just supported anything that I wanted to do. So, you know, and he was just this safe place for me. He was home for me. So anyway, we dated for a while because my dad was like, you can't get married till you finish college. And Mike went and asked for my hand in marriage. He asked my dad in that old fashioned way, which I loved. I didn't know he was doing it at the time. And my dad said, yes, but she has to finish college first. So we waited out of respect for my family, out of respect for everybody. We waited till I graduated from college, and then we got married. And then, gosh, it was just such a fairy tale for so many reasons. I mean, we were so happy. We traveled the world together. We went everywhere together. And I was an engineer. That was my job. And I'll never forget, I was an engineer, but I was kind of an accidental engineer. Like, that's not really me.
Oh, first of all, suspend all disbelief. How does one become an accidental engineer? I'm telling you, super humble. So you're an engineer.
I am, but anyway, I was an engineer and I had a good engineering job, and, but I just wasn't passionate about it. Not at all. So I kind of knew I was in the wrong thing for me, because I'm an engineer, but I don't like math. Like, have you ever heard of such a thing? I don't like math. I love working with engineers. They're wonderful people, but just wasn't me. So Mike and I decided to go to Africa on an African safari because I love nature. I love being outside. I love animals. And this was going to be our big trip before we had kids. So we were had this big trip planned. And we went to Africa, and I got off that plane and I was blown away. Like I still get goosebumps just even thinking about it. So I got off the plane, and there was this wide expanse of nature and all these animals, and everything looked like it did maybe a million years ago. I mean, you hear about it, you read about it in books, you see it on TV, but to actually be in it was just life-changing for me. So I knew it was life-changing, even though I didn't know how my life was going to change. So I got back to the US after this amazing trip. We saw elephants, we saw the Great Migration, we had, lions, leopard, cheetah. It's all of those things it's basically the Lion King. If you've seen the movie The Lion King, that's what it's like in Tanzania, where I do my safaris. So anyway, I got back, and I ended up just writing a thank you note. This is actually a really long story, but I'll tell the abbreviated version. So I wrote a thank you note to the guy who owned the company that I went on the safari with. And it was a long thank you note, though, because I really like to write. So I wrote on and on and on, and he got it, and he said thank you. And then a couple of days later, he said thank you again for this thank you note, and I just can't stop reading it. And I said, oh, well, okay. So we exchanged a few more emails, and then he said, I'd really like for you to work for me, just kind of freelance on the side. Would you be willing to write for my website? And I said, sure. And I think I mentioned before, I wasn't super happy with my job. So I kind of noticed that this might be a foot in the door for something different. And it was. So he got what I wrote. I just wrote about the 5 lodges where I stayed. He got that, and he said, this is great. He said, the only problem is you have a very distinct writing style, and it doesn't match anything else on my website. So I really need to send you back to Africa for a month, and I'll pay you for it, and I'll pay you to do it. Can you do that? And I said, yes.
Yeah.
I don't know how I'm going to make that work. But basically, at the end of this long story, I knew I had a job with the company when I got back from Africa. And I remember talking to Mike about it, and he was so supportive. He's like, wow, this is your dream. I said, I know, but I got to say goodbye to this high paying job. It's an engineering job. It's really secure. He's like, you have to go for this. I mean, he was so supportive and didn't even bat an eyelash about it. So I did. I jumped off the cliff and went and quit my job and went to work with this crazy idea with this safari company selling safaris. And I remember nobody else supported me. Everybody thought I was crazy, but not Mike. The only three people in the whole world that thought I should do it were Mike and my parents. My parents are like, you go, girl. But I mean, I could say I want to be an astronaut and they'd be like, you go, girl. so Mike and my parents and everybody else was like, well, this is adorable. Go get this out of your system. And then when you're ready to come back to be an engineer, you can do that. And so anyway, long story short, I've been doing it for 17 years. I never went back. I spent an amazing life. And so Mike went to Africa with me several times, and he was just like that with everything. Like we never really fought. I know some people might say that's bad. Like you have to have disagreements, but we just never really did. We both just had a lot of empathy for each other. And it's not that we never disagreed, but we really, really just put the other person first. And so it was an amazing marriage. It was an amazing life. And we were never able to have kids. That was never in the cards for us. But gosh, we really did have an amazing life. And we ended up moving back to the little dinky hometown where my family was from, because Mike was going to help my dad farm. My dad was getting older. He was going to retire. And so Mike was going to help take over the farm. And I could work from anywhere. So as long as I have a phone and internet, I can plan safaris from anywhere in the world. And we were always like the Cayman Islands or, this little rural town in the middle of nowhere. And anyway, the little rural town in the middle of nowhere won because that's where our family was. And that just became our priority. So we did. And just never, ever in a million years would I have seen what was coming down the road. So anyway, I feel like I'm talking a lot. Is there anything else did I miss something?
You're setting the stage perfectly. Tell me, how old were you now at this point? You guys got married in your early 20s. Now you've been at African Dream Safaris for 17 years. So when Mike and you came back to rural Kansas, how old were you?
Gosh, I was in my 30s. Okay. So probably early 30s. And then we lived in the little rural town. I was 39 when the accident happened. So when I said I worked for the safari company for 17 years, that's today. And yeah. I lost Mike back in 2016. So again, I mentioned I'm not good at math, so I don't know how old I was, but I was in my 30s, and I was 39 when I lost Mike in the accident. And it was a sudden accident, of course. It was during my family's harvest. Harvest is a big time for wheat farmers. And so Mike was just out there helping my family and helping my dad. And he was working on a combine, and it fell on him. So the header fell off of the combine and fell on him. So he was killed instantly. He didn't suffer at all, which was important for me to know, later. And my poor dad, he was in the combine when it happened. So he had to go through all of that. And that was huge. I'll never forget when he came in the door to tell me what had happened. Like, he was so strong and so wise. And he basically said the three things that were most important to hear, at the time was, there's been a tragedy. So he told me the truth of what happened. He said Mike had died. And then he said, it's nobody's fault, because it's hard to understand where your brain goes after that. But I really needed to know these things in order to process all of the terrible grief that was coming down the pipeline. So he told me what had happened in as few words as possible. He told me It was nobody's fault. And then he told me Mike didn't suffer, because that was really important to my heart. So and then I was able to kind of process the rest of it. But yeah, it was no easy road. So no easy road. I suppose, like, looking back, there's the grief of losing your best friend in the whole world and your husband and your future. I mean, the way you see it, right? At the time. And I mean, your whole plan just got canceled. So
everything,
everything. So there's that. And just losing that person. So there's the grief of losing the person. And then there's the grief of, like, losing. I mean, my identity was so wrapped up in Mike and me. Like, people didn't even say, Dawn. People didn't say Mike. People would be like Mike and Dawn. Like, we had kind of a collective title because we always did everything together. And so my identity was really wrapped up in him. I think a lot of times when people get together and they're young, I think they can grow apart because you're still not who you're going to be, right? But we kind of grew together. So our whole life was kind of enmeshed in each other. And I mean, not in an unhealthy way, I don't think. It kind of sounds that way when I say that. But I mean, we still supported each other. We were both very independent. We both had our own dreams and goals, and we just supported each other in that. So it was like this freeing thing. It was a safe relationship, but you were free to be whatever you wanted to be and do whatever, you were meant to do. So we were tied up in that way. So not only was I grieving the loss of Mike, this amazing person, but I was also kind of grieving the loss of us and the life that we had. So, and who I was when I was with him. I mean, he really did bring out the best in me. And so I kind of had to deal with all of those things. And
I just imagine Mike hard. With this beautiful, from the day I first talked to you, and you sent me pictures of him and pictures of the two of you for our first meeting to give me perspective on who you are, who Mike and Dawn were, and how you were coming through this tunnel on your own. And you're right, his photos and he's so handsome, like a movie star, as you would say, and you two just emanated ease and joy in your photos.
Easy. I've heard you say that before. Like, you're in the right relationship when it's easy.
When it's easy
and joyful.
And joyful. So you John has just written a great book, and we're going through parts of this, but I'm going to say it's called The Darkness and the Stars, and it'll tell you way more detail. When I read her story, I know the story like I know so many of my clients' stories, right? It's sort of like, okay, here's the tunnel I've walked through, and now here I am, and I'm ready to date. But to read this book, it's a beautiful explanation of what the days were like, what that hour was like, what she felt in her body. And it gave me so much perspective and empathy for someone who goes through that sick trauma that hopefully nobody has to go through. And so if, make sure I'll put a link in the show notes to the book, but it's amazing. And it'll tell you what this incredibly beautiful girl, this strong woman went through to get here to tell you the story that she has been through today. So now let's flash forward a little bit. You are in hell. You are getting used to, you have this new life. You've been thrust into a life that you did not choose and you did not want. And at a certain point, you feel, and this must be some years ago, where maybe you're ready to date. Maybe you're just ready to put something in the wound at this point. What happened there to get you from A to B? And then we'll get into your dating story.
Yeah. So I mean, grief is definitely an evolution. Like, of course, at the beginning of all of this, I didn't know what I didn't know. And I know that everybody's who goes through grief, their story is a little different, and how they process it's going to be different. I'm also, interestingly enough, and I write about this in my book, I mean, there's a lot of things that are similar too. You know, a lot of the nuances are different, but I think a lot of people going through grief are also united by a lot of the same sort of universal truths. And some of the evolution is definitely going to be linked by some common thread, you know. But I say that just because this was my story. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the same for anyone else. But like when I lost Mike, there was the whole, I mean, I just kind of slipped into survival mode for a while.
Yeah.
So you just take one day at a time. But yeah, losing him left a giant void. Like, he was my best friend, and I had been with someone since, you know, I was 17. So I hadn't really been super single anytime as an adult. So I didn't really like the idea. You know, if somebody said, "Are you ready to date?" I'd be like, no. But at the same time, I still had this big void. And so I just kind of evolved. I ended up sort of dating someone accidentally. We became friends first, and then it ended up turning romantic. And there were a lot of wonderful things about the relationship, but it was very uplifting. I had this new person in my life who really, really, I felt like he saw me. I felt like he cared. I felt he was filling in a lot of these voids, but I was also still in a place where maybe I wasn't able to see some red flags over here on the side. And so I was struggling a little bit. I mean, I was in this relationship, but a few things just weren't quite right. And the other person I was in the relationship with was wanting to take it to the next level. And it just didn't feel right in my gut. And I didn't really know what to do. I mean, I would talk to friends and family, and I felt like they were all censoring what they were saying, you know, like to kind of just, maybe they were giving me advice, but it was always biased advice. And so
For sure.
anyway, I felt like I was kind of in a vulnerable place, and I didn't know what I didn't know, but I did know enough to like not super trust my decisions at the time. And I just needed someone to check me out, like check where I was. Let me bounce this off of someone. And I happened to be watching Steve Harvey one day, and he had Bella on, and I was just kind of transfixed. I don't remember what the episode was about. I'm sure it was dating. But you were just like giving amazing advice. And I was like, I wonder who this person is. Like, she seems pretty cool. And you were a relationship coach. And I was like, I never really heard of that before. But I mean, people have coaches for other stuff. Like, people have coaches for fitness. People have financial coaches, all of these other things. And I've always put a lot of weight on like the person you choose to marry, for example, or the person you choose to be with as your significant other, because I feel like that permeates into all different kinds, all different aspects of your life. Like, it just takes a huge chunk. So I put a lot of weight on that. And I was like, well, why not have a relationship coach? Like, it's so important. It's such an important part of your life. And whether it's good or bad, like if you're not with the right person, it can really influence your life in negative ways. Anyway, I was putting a lot of weight on it. I looked you up online and I found your websites, and I thought, really? Like, it's as easy as just emailing her or calling. I think I just emailed you, right? And then we set up a time to talk. And then I told you everything. I told you all about my whole story. We talked for a long time. And you were so, you're such a friendly person anyway. Like, it's really easy to click with you. And I'm sure a lot of people do, but I really did. I felt like we were best friends from forever ago. And I mean, but you were better than a best friend, because you had, like, number one, you were you were an expert. Like, you already kind of knew. Like, a lot of my friends were giving me advice, but maybe it wasn't the best advice. Like, everybody means well, but you were a relationship expert. It wasn't your first rodeo. And then also you could kind of look at it in a little bit clearer light than maybe me, who was in the trenches, and all these people around me giving me advice who were also kind of in the same trenches. And so you didn't tell me what to do. You just kind of gently guided me in the right direction. And then after that phone call, we agreed to, like, check in later, and you just kind of let me be like, this can be some next steps. If you decide to end this relationship, there is a future for you. It's not the end of the world. Like, there's other things we can do. And so I did. So I just kind of let the advice simmer. I kind of let the whole scenario play out naturally, but with a little bit more, I felt a little more grounded. I felt a little more centered, and a little more confident that I was making the right decisions, and that I didn't have to just be in this relationship because there was nobody else. I could, just keep my options open. And as I was evolving in my grief and coming to clarity, a lot of these things became more apparent. So you just kind of, like, gave me the kick I needed to get where I needed to be. So,
and I want to pause you right there. And I want to make sure, listeners, you hear this, that sometimes when we come into a relationship and we feel like, there might be some red flags, but I don't know. Typically, what we tend to do is we'll keep brushing the red flags under the rug because we fear that this is the last person on earth. And wow, I mean, he's better than being alone, or she's better than going back on the apps again. But the resounding answer to that, and like Dawn said, is wherever you are in your journey right now, have hope that you don't need to settle for something that has red flags around it, right? There's all sorts of great relationships out there, and there is a great future for you. So if you're hanging into something that, it's like Goldilocks, it's like, this chair feels a little too small, or this chair feels a little too big. You don't have to settle for that. And so I'm so glad that message made an impact on you, that there is another future out there for you. There is another mission for you, should you choose to accept it.
Right. And I guess I just didn't see that at the time. But of course, after I talked to you, I thought, well, maybe there are other possibilities. And I hadn't even done any online dating yet. So this other person that I was in a relationship with just kind of happened through a friendship first, and then anyway, one thing led to another. And
right.
When we were talking about the online dating, and I saw that as a way to expand my pool, because I live in a very tiny little rural town in the middle of nowhere. And I feel like I already know everybody in this town. Like, I know, and so that brings its own, anyway, it felt like a shallow dating pool. But we were talking about online dating and how you can kind of use that to expand your dating pool.
Yeah.
And I also remember from Steve Harvey saying, like, if you find the right person, there's really no distance doesn't really matter in the end. It's just an excuse. So
your soulmate is not going to come from your zip code.
Right. So anyway, but it also felt super intimidating because I'd already heard a bunch of stories about online dating, and I'm like, I don't know how to do it. I don't want to do it. And then you just made it all so much more manageable somehow. Like, you said, well, this is what we'll do. And like I said, it wasn't your first rodeo. It was my first rodeo, but it wasn't yours. And so I felt like I would be sort of remiss to miss out on this opportunity to use your experience to kind of put my best foot forward. And I just felt like I'd been through enough. I just had enough of the drama and the heartbreak, and I just wanted something to be a little easier. So I wanted to make it as easy on myself as possible. Right. Like, This doesn't have to be hard. This can be fun. Fun is a great word. Like, it's not all the serious business we make it all to be. Like, let's have some fun. So I never thought about having fun before. As terrible as that sounds. Like, really, this can be fun? But so you made it super fun. So we got together. You helped me do a profile. We did the whole photo shoot, which was amazing. You helped me know what to wear. I remember you saying to bring dresses, and I was like, oh, Bella, I've been waiting for this moment. I love dresses. So.
She sent me no less than 25 pictures of her in different dresses. I'm like, are you kidding me? Normally people are like, oh my gosh, I don't have any dresses. You're like, no. I love dresses. And Dawn might be one out of 100 people that do our photo shoots that didn't need to buy any new clothes at all. Because she's like, I have long, I have short, I have sleeves, I have no sleeves. I have absolutely everything. And my, and from Dawn's perspective, it was that. And from my perspective, having been through these rodeos before, what I know to be true with so many people, whether you've come out of especially when you've lost a partner that was a very good partner, the risks that I see are, it's God's blessing. You don't know, in a sense, what a bad relationship is. Sometimes, you don't know what a red flag is. And we've heard all these things like, well, marriage is work, relationships are work. So we think, well, I guess maybe my relationship with Mike was easy and maybe this is just going to be more work, right? And that's where for me, I want to wrap. And I wanted, the minute I met Dawn, I'm like, oh, I want to wrap this girl in like extra sparkly, extra padded pink bubble wrap and prevent her from any more hurt during this process, right? Because sometimes when you've come out of, you met Mike at 17, now you're thrust back into the dating world in your early 40s. Was that right?
Well, I was 39 when I lost him. So yes, I started dating. I was in my early 40s.
You were in your early 40s. And sometimes it's funny. It's like, you wouldn't know a red flag if it hit you in the face, to use an old expression, right? Like we don't know because we come from what's good and your parents were lovely. And so for you, I think, mission number one was just keeping you out of harm's way, away from red flag people, and not to rush into something too quickly. Because as a 17-year-old, you're like, lid, pot, nice to meet you, karate class, let's do this, right? And so now when the dating landscape has changed so much, we're older now, we're different people. You're a different Dawn through this tunnel than you were back in that karate class, right? And it's like, how do I navigate this? So you came to Chicago, you're right, we did your photo shoot, and I remember you asking me a question like, Bella, what's a really good Greek restaurant? And I said, oh, you like Greek food? You're like, well, I have the specific favorite food. Have you ever heard of moussaka? I said, well, yeah, because I grew up with some people and moussaka is layered meat and potatoes. And I thought a lovely girl from rural Kansas wants this Greek delicacy. She's pretty cool, and went out and said, I had the best moussaka I've ever had in Chicago when she came in for the photo shoot. So now flash forward, you go through our process, who your next high GHQ guy is going to be. We go through, we make the list of your elevator people. We talk about red flags, how we're going to pace your relationships. You get your photos done. You have a profile. Now you're quote unquote launched online. And what I remember is, first of all, COVID happened right when you launched yourself online.
Right when I did. Yeah.
It was
huge.
Bananas. It was like March of 2020. And Dawn, being Dawn, the eternal psychotic optimist, was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe how many messages I'm getting. And this is actually kind of fun. And where did all these people come from? And we're like, you're beautiful. And you have this beauty inside of you. You're going to bring so many people to you, regardless of how rural. And I just remember your mind being so blown in the beginning. And correct me if I'm wrong, like, this is just fun. And look at all these people that actually want to go out on dates with me. I'm like, you didn't think this would happen? You're like, no, I didn't know what would happen. So it was so magical in the beginning. And you had lots of interest from a lot of different people, right?
It was, I did. And I was pleasantly surprised. Like, I did not know what to expect at all, but I'm so glad you were there, like in the beginning, to like navigate some of this stuff. I feel like some of the guys that I went on dates with or communicated with, like, I feel like I could write a sitcom about it, like it's just, there were so many like classical, like this guy is the player, this guy is anyway, like you name it. I like bumped into all these personalities, and I feel like I'd write another book about that. But of course, I'm sure you could. Anyway, so you were kind of there to help guide me through all of that, really, and was able to kind of avoid some pitfalls, I think, and there were a few relationships that were just kind of difficult, and you helped me navigate all of those. It was so nice to have someone to talk to who, kind of knew the dating landscape and kind of helped me avoid some of those pitfalls. So that was invaluable and priceless. And and then I found Matthew, who I'm with today. So that was interesting. So Matthew was he lived about 2.5 hours away from where I lived. And
did you all hear that? 2.5 hours away. Some of you were like, "Oh, this person's 10 miles away. They're never going to come." 2.5 hours. So, I can't wait to hear how this story unfolds, because I've got details in my memory as well.
Yes. So Matthew was a very interesting person. So I remember he was the opposite of boring, and he really did catch my interest. So we communicated a little bit with messages, but one of the things I liked to do right away was talk to someone on the phone. Well, Zoom wasn't really as big then as it is now, but I definitely wanted to talk to somebody on the phone, because I feel like you could learn a lot just by talking and having conversation. And he wanted to do it right away. Like, he's like, I just want to talk on the phone. And I was like, oh, because I got some resistance from people before. They were like, well, they'd send another message or a text or whatever. And just felt like I was kind of burning some time doing that kind of stuff. So I loved that. So he wanted to talk on the phone, and we talked on the phone I know we were supposed to limit it. I think like you limit your first conversations on the phone, but I mean, the time just flew by. We would talk for hours on the phone. And then, and he was very funny. He's very funny, very outgoing. I could tell he was just he had been through a lot in his life as well. So he also had kind of a depth and a capacity that I was attracted to. And you learn that when you talk to someone on the phone. So we talked on the phone a lot. And and then he wanted to meet me. And because it was during COVID, it was hard. Like, I didn't want this strange man to come to my house for the first time, but really we were limited on where we could go. So we just decided, he lived 2.5 hours away from where I did. And there's this charming little town that's just halfway between our two towns. And we just decided to meet there. There's a park with a castle and a place to sit outside. And this was in the spring. So we just decided to have a picnic. And it was such a fun first date. Like, I remember when we first met, I was still sitting in my car, and he had just pulled up, and he got out and he, like, this is just Matthew. Like, he just says what he thinks. He's super honest, which is, you know, a blessing and a curse sometimes, but he's very honest, and just said, "Oh my gosh, you are so pretty." And I was so like caught off guard by that, because a lot of times people are kind of reserved when they first meet you, or kind of, you know, it was very disarming. So I just laughed, and that was the start of the first date. And so we got our little picnic basket, and he brought the food and I brought the wine, and we went and sat at a picnic table and just talked for hours. And then we walked up into the castle, which was it's a very simple castle. I say castle in a very generous way. It's more like a little castle sounds very grand. It is a castle, sort of. It's more like a little fort that's outside that sits on top of a hill. It's very pretty. It has a great view, but it's quite rustic. So, and it's all open air. So we like went up to the top to deck, and he just let me talk and talk and talk. And he made me laugh so much. Like, he's one of the funniest people I know. So he would just make me laugh, and he would tell all these stories. And then at the end of the date, he was very respectful, like such a gentleman. Like, I had been on some dates where, like, I don't even know if you really like me. Like, you know, there's not any kind of invitation for a next date. There's not any kind of, I don't know, like
nothing affirmative, nothing
to confirm. Everybody's very guarded.
Sure.
So he was the opposite of that. So he was very appropriate, but gave me just a very nice peck on the cheek, you know, to say goodbye, wanted to see me again, had held my hand for the 3 steps from the castle to the car. And then, you know, looking back on that, COVID was kind of a blessing in a way, because really you just go on a date with someone in a normal sit down restaurant and you just talk for an hour or 2 maybe, and then you go your separate ways. But we like spent the whole afternoon into the evening together and then parted ways. And so, during the course of one of our phone conversations, so the other thing that I didn't know at the time, of course I know now, but just to kind of set it up into context, Matthew loves to cook. He loves to cook. He's a very good cook. But I had told him, you know, we would ask each other questions on the phone, just getting to know each other. One of them that came up at one point was, "What is your favorite food?" And I was like, "Oh, moussaka." And he was like, "What? What is that?" And I said, "Oh, well, you can't make it." I said, "You just, like, when I go to new cities, you know, there's no place around here that serves moussaka. So when I go to different cities, I always try to find a Greek restaurant, and then I order the moussaka just because it's fun to see how it's different in different places." Again, this is that Greek dish, which is very complicated to make. It's kind of like a lasagna, only way worse, because you have to cook the food. Like, if you're going to try to make it, you have to cook the potatoes and eggplant and squash. You don't cook it all together. You cook it in different layers. So you have to put it in the oven for 40 minutes, take it back out, put on another layer, put it in the oven for 40 minutes, take it back out, put it on another. And then, you know, you keep doing that. And then there's this bechamel sauce, which is like, you need a magic trick to make it. Like, it's very, it's still kind of voodoo to me. I'm not even really sure. So I said, no, because I kind of thought maybe he was thinking, "Oh, well, maybe I'll make that for dinner sometime." And I'm like, no. You know, I didn't mean it. Like, I said, I also like spaghetti. I also like
pizza.
You know, I like peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. So little did I know he was making a mental note. So anyway, on our second date, we met in the same little charming town that sits just between us. And we got a blanket and sat in the park and asked each other questions. And I think I told you, Bella, we were solving all the problems of the world and figuring everything out, and just had very in-depth conversations. And then it was getting time to go find something to eat, but of course our options were limited. So we were going to go try and find a sandwich shop or something where we could go get sandwiches and bring it back to the park. And he's like, no, I have a surprise for you. So he went to the back of his car and pulled out this giant, like, plate of moussaka. He had made it. He's had practiced on his family the whole week before. He had made it. This was like his fourth time trying to make it.
Because it was hard.
It was hard and he kept messing it up. And so he finally figured it out, made the bechamel sauce and had this whole plate of moussaka. And I was stunned. I was floored. This was only our second date. I'm like, wow, he's definitely paying attention and he has a lot of try.
I remember when you called me and told me this, and I was like, okay, second date, moussaka, made it 4 times to perfect it. I was like, either this guy is bananas or she's going to marry him. It's one or the other. And of course, there's me. Are you in a public place?
We were. We went to a gas station and like heated it up in their microwave and then brought it back out to the park and had our moussaka, and it was so good. He really did a good job. So that was really fun. Yeah. Was one of the things I really liked about him. Like he didn't really hold back. He was very much like, and that's just how Matthew does life, right? Like he's like, I know this is what I want and I'm going to go after it with everything that I can. So it's been like that ever since. Like he really does have, he just lives his life with so much heart and so much try. And he's so generous and so loving. And he's just become my biggest cheerleader in the whole world. Like he'll do, I know that if it was him in that place where I'm getting ready to quit my engineering job and go sell safaris. Like, good luck with that. Like, he would be like, you go, girl. He would be that guy. So I kind of thought maybe that was a rare find.
Oh, he was such a rare find. And I remember so many of our conversations in the beginning about things to dig deeper on, things to ask about, like what caused the divorce? Where do you want to be? Like, and really through this process, excavating the details that are important to know about this person's past. But more importantly, we don't hold anybody's past against them. But the question is always, what have you done to grow?
Yes.
And what impressed me about him from the get-go is this is a guy that was invested in being the best version of himself. And again, like Dawn's saying, Matthew, and I haven't met Matthew, but yet I feel like through our conversations over the last few years now, I feel like this is a person that in a good way wears his heart on his sleeve and he lives out loud and he's fiercely loyal to the people in his tribe. And he will, he's probably that guy that if your tire's flat at 3 a.m, you got a short list of people who would come out and rescue you. And Matthew would be that guy who's on everybody's list that knows him.
That's exactly right. No, you explained it very well. And it was a lesson for me as well. I mean, one I kind of needed to learn that I didn't even really know that I needed to learn. But I mean, Matthew is very different than Mike, my late husband. I mean, Mike had a lot more, just a different demeanor. So Matthew, he, like I said, he sees something and he goes after it with his whole heart. Like if he really, really wants it, he doesn't hold back. He wears his heart on his sleeve. And like in the beginning, that almost felt like too much to me at times. And I needed him to slow down. And one of the really, really impressive things about him, at one point when I did kind of put the brakes on where we were going with the relationship, and I told him I needed a break because I was still getting over a lot. I was still dealing with a lot. And all of a sudden have someone pursuing me like he was, and talking about marriage already, some big life changes. It just felt like a lot to me. And so he did, he put the brakes on. He was so respectful and, but still gently pursued me in a way that felt good to me. And I really admire that about him, is his capacity to adjust and change. And anyway,
he's coachable.
Yeah, he's coachable. And one of the really nice side benefits about that was that, we were in this, like, I don't know, in the beginning, it was fun, but it's still like this, you're meeting someone and then you're kind of thrust into a romantic relationship with them. And you don't have a lot of history, you don't have a lot of background yet. So I felt like when we took a little bit of a pause, we still saw each other, but just more casually, more as friends. And we would talk on the phone sometimes. And that allowed us to really get some depth to the relationship. So we became really, really good friends. Like, he is my best friend now. Like, we became just amazing friends, got to know each other even better, and then allowed the romance to kind of take care of itself with that foundation underneath of it. And that has been the secret sauce for us on making some progress in a way that feels good to me. Because I tend to be more reserved. I tend to be more careful, to a fault, maybe sometimes. And so in that way, I feel like we complement one another. And it's a good match. And he's so creative. He's so generous. He's so wonderful. And I just had to allow myself to see all of those traits kind of just bloom, rather than, he's not what I expected exactly, so I'm just going to shut the door. You know what I mean? So anyway, it was
He's so different. He's so different than Mike. And that
was
hard in the beginning. It's hard. Yeah. It's like, here's a man who I was with for 20 years that had a quiet confidence, right? That was just peaceful and maybe emerged from a room a day later with a solution, and you didn't know he was working on it. And then juxtapose, and Mike loved you fiercely and was your biggest cheerleader. And now to go to a personality with somebody who will, bust down walls for you and has a confidence that may not be quite as quiet, but assertive in a sense. And so just the personality differences to navigate that. And when you have lost someone you love, and I can only imagine to accept somebody who's different is hard.
Yeah, it was hard. And I had to allow myself time and space to evolve to that place where I could do it. But I'm so glad that I also have the capacity to change and evolve. And we've really evolved together in this relationship, and it feels really good now. And I realized a lot of that had to do with me. Like, looking back, a lot of it had to do with me and like being in a place where I needed to be in order to take a step forward.
Absolutely. And you guys know the research shows that in heterosexual relationships, at least, men can fall in love harder and faster than women, right? And so it doesn't,
but yeah.
And it doesn't necessarily mean, oh my gosh, is he a narcissist? Is he love bombing? He's declaring his love for me right away. It just means, okay, with that being said, if this person is moving faster than you want, more assertively than you want, then the litmus test, it's not that. The litmus test for, is this person a good partner for you, is how do they respond to you putting the brakes on? Do they have a hissy fit and a tantrum and say, you're losing out on the best thing that's ever happened to you? Or do they say, it's okay, I understand, it might hurt, but let's do this on your terms. I'll wait. And that is always the litmus test. So just because somebody comes out of the gate making you moussaka in the back seat on the second date, you might go, oh my God, Dawn was being love bombed. Not necessarily. And this is the beauty of time. Through the process. There is no substitute in the dating and relationship process for one commodity, and that's time.
Yeah. And I remember you saying that to me several times. Yeah.
Yeah. And letting something breathe. Hell, We train for marathons for 8 months. We let a bottle of wine breathe for an hour, but with relationships, we want to know right now, is it going to work? Is it right? Is it left? It's like, hold on, let's just see what happens step by step by step. And for you, listening to yourself and being okay. And I remember fully supporting and in fact, advocating to push the brakes, pump the brakes. This is a good man. You have to do things at a rate that you're comfortable at.
Yeah. And that's part of my nature. And it's also where I was in my sort of evolving out of my grief process and transitioning into a brand new life. Like that was huge. And I really just needed to go at my pace. And so everything you said is spot on about giving it time. And he allowed me to do that, which I agree is a great litmus test. You know, he could have moved on quickly, but he did not do that.
He did not, and nor did you. And open communication from a place of love that's honest, right, is what, in a sense, I call it the relationship container. It keeps the container clean. You always want to wipe the lint out of the container, never let the dirt build up in that. And being open and honest where you are, these are the tests of, is somebody going to be a good partner for you? If they don't agree to pump the brakes on in the beginning, what are they going to be like 10 years down the road? Right? If you're not willing to respect a wish, like, can we talk on the phone first? And like you were saying, you were getting friction from God. Well, I just really like to meet. That shows you who this person is. Are they flexible? Are they willing to say, okay, sure, I'd meet you halfway. Yeah, let's talk on the phone. I'd love to meet, but that's a great idea. Let's do it this way. These are all little kicks to the tire of a used car that you want to buy. Maybe that's not the best metaphor, but you know what I mean? It's like, you're giving this person, you're seeing, how could we navigate the differences in between us, right? Because as easy as a relationship could be between you and Mike, or you and Matthew, or me and Andy, for example, that doesn't mean it's conflict free. It doesn't mean it's friction free ever. It means, and if we're in relationships where we feel like, wow, you know, it's easy, we never fight. You and Mike knew each other well enough that you'd be like, I'm going to give into this because I know this is really going to make her happy, and give him. But that's not using your voice. That's, the other person, yourself. You're not sacrificing your boundaries, right? And so conflict in even the most beautiful relationships still exists. Conflict exists when you put any two human beings together for a long enough time. Family members, children, spouses, stepchildren, colleagues, it happens. But what do you do? How do you navigate through that conflict? And what you and Matthew were able to do is navigate those differences in where you were in the relationship to the point where you could both accept the other person and meet each other when and where you were ready. So now flash forward to this engagement that happened in a very special place. Tell us the second lid to your pot, Moussaka Matthew, what happened?
Well, so we decided, I just wanted to go to Paris. I mean, really, I wanted to go to Paris, had nothing to do with an engagement or anything like that. But he fully supported a trip to Paris. Anyway, one thing led to another, and he took me to Paris last summer. And man, Matthew does big gestures really well. So he did this one really well. I mean, we got engaged right at the foot of the Eiffel Tower. He had a professional photographer there to capture all of the moments. He told me we were just going out on a photo shoot. So, because I wanted to do that, a chance to wear a dress anytime, right?
Of course. One of John's 30 dresses.
So he's like, we'll just do a photo shoot. That was the reason for the photographer. And so we both got dressed up, and then we were taking a walk with the photographer, and she's like, why don't you just go over there, like over there by the river, and I'll get some pictures of you two together. And I said, no, I don't want to, because I thought Matthew was going to pick me up. And like, anyway, I was afraid I was going to fall in the river. So she's like, no, just trust me, just go do it. And I said, okay, I did. And then I turned around and Matthew was already there, and he was already down on one knee, and he had the most amazing ring and asked me to marry him. And it was beautiful. It was epic in every way. So, but that's Matthew. Like, he just knows how to do things really well. He's all for celebrating life and living big. And why not? I mean, life is short. So, so we got engaged, and now we're planning a wedding for this fall.
How beautiful. And how do you feel? Did you ever think you'd be in this place?
No, but you don't know what you don't know. You know, what's that saying? God made the world round, so you can't see too far ahead. I love that saying, because the good stuff, the bad stuff, all the stuff that comes along the way, I mean, really, we don't know what's ahead. And so that's my big takeaway from all of this. I mean, going through grief and losing Mike, I mean, it changed me as a person forever, but I think it made me a better person. And as I've continued to evolve through the whole grief process and opening my heart to new possibilities for the future, I mean, I was really reluctant to do that for a really long time. You feel like, I think when you're in that grief process, you kind of feel mistakenly like you're honoring the person that you lost by suffering, by staying stuck. Like somehow you're honoring them, but that's not really true, in my opinion. Even though it feels like it at the time, I feel like you honor them more by living. You know, that's what I would want for Mike if I was the one who left before him. And so I know he would want that for me. And so anyway, but again, it's easy to say it in this place where I am now, but I was nowhere close to where I am now back then, you know, several years ago, right after I lost Mike. So I think the other big takeaway is just, if you're going through something like this, and I suppose some of the people who you're working with, you're probably working with a segment of that demographic, or people who have lost spouses and not something that they chose to have happen. You know, just be patient with yourself. Like, just be patient with yourself. Like, you're gonna get there, but just put one foot in front of the other and allow yourself to evolve to that place where you're ready to do something new. And it doesn't mean that you are dishonoring the person that came before the new person. The capacity of the human heart is amazing. There's no limit on the love that you can give. So just because I love someone else doesn't diminish the love I had for Mike in any way. It's amazing. There's no limit. There's no capacity. So I'm just grateful that I can look back on the road that I've traveled. And, you know, my hope with my book is that I can help other people too. Like, one of the things that really helped me when I was first going through grief was reading other people's stories. It was so validating because all these other people around me, they wanted to help me. I was surrounded by friends and family who loved me dearly, but they really they hadn't gone through what I had gone through. They just weren't in a place where they could meet me where I was in this grief tunnel. And by reading the stories of other people who had gone through grief, it was so validating. It made me feel like I wasn't alone. So that's what I did with my book, is I just wanted to help other people. I wanted to help other people like other people helped me. And so really, those were the three things that helped me the most. I think get through grief was, you know, just helping other people was probably one of the most cathartic things. Well, writing was an important way for me to process my grief, and then helping other people, and then also finding ways to honor Mike. So like, all the proceeds of any of my book sales, it's all going to charity. So I just wanted to mention that too, because I wanted to honor Mike in some way. So that allowed me to, by helping other people, I feel like I'm honoring him, kind of doing it in his name.
Well, what you're doing, and it gives me goosebumps, is all coming from that place of love. It was loving yourself and letting yourself tell your story, and to pay it forward to the people that would walk through grief and they don't even know that it might be coming, that's going to be part of their story, because the giants that lifted you up probably have no idea that their words and their stories lifted you up. So you are doing God's work. I'm going to put a link to Dawn's breathtaking story called The Darkness and the Stars by Dawn Anderson in the book. I couldn't be prouder of you for who you are as a human being, and just that I still I'm rendered speechless not very often. I don't know what I must have done right to have someone like you in my life and be able to hold your hand through your journey and wrap you in pink sparkly bubble wrap. But I'm so grateful. I knew from the first call we had back in 2019 that you got into my heart in less than an hour. I was like, and I think I would just ping you in between, like, hey, it's Bela from Smart Dating Academy, just checking on you. And before you had even made the leap, because you have that, that you are like a giant walking heart, and to know you is to love you. And thank you for trusting me through the process.
Thank you, Bela. I can't tell you how grateful I am for you. Thank you. I think sometimes people are put in our life for a reason, and I believe that. So I'm so grateful that I have you in my life, and thank you for holding my hand and helping me get through that. Really, I can't say enough about it.
Oh, well, I can't wait to see wedding pictures. And is there any parting words of advice you'd want to give the single people that are coming through the tunnel?
Just, be patient with yourself. Like, be really patient with the whole evolution of grief. It's real tempting to kind of stagnate there and get lost in that tunnel, especially in the early stages of grief when it's all still so very raw. You don't have to have it all figured out. I don't think I had the capacity to see beyond one step in front of me, for a long time. So be patient with yourself and don't lose hope. I mean, there's a giant world out there, and you can honor the person that you lost by living. Like, that's the best way to do it. And helping other people is probably one of the best ways that helped me cope. So, don't lose hope, and be patient with yourself.
Oh, I love that. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us that you can have one lid to your pot, and you can certainly find another. It's going to be a different lid. You might have gone from a red lid to a green lid, or a cast iron lid to a tempered glass lid, but there can be more than one lid to your pot, more than one soulmate. And again, to support Dawn and the foundation that she set up for Mike, and all of her proceeds will go to charity. Help my friend out and buy her book and share it with anybody that you know that is going through grief. Share this episode with anybody who is going through grief, because if somebody has lived to tell and exercised that muscle of resilience and been to hell and back more than almost any other human I know, it's you. So thank you for being here, and thank you for writing your book, and thank you for sharing your story. And I think we're going to have you on again to talk about married life.
It would be an honor. One foot in front of the other.
Absolutely.
I'll be here.
All right. Well, I love you, Dawn. Thank you for being here.
I love you, Bela. Thank you so much. It's an honor.